What if Aquaman's biggest battle isn't against monsters, but for the fate of the entire ocean kingdom? Get ready for epic action, hidden facts, and everything you need to know about Aquaman 2028 in just a few minutes. You are watching Sonu Hub, so stay till the end for amazing facts you probably didn't know. And Aquaman is a 2018 American superhero movie based on the famous DC Comics character Arthur Curry, also known as Aquaman. The movie was made by DC Films, Warner Brothers Pictures, and the Safran Company, and it is the sixth movie in the DC Extended Universe (DCEU). It was directed by James Wan and written by David Leslie Johnson, McGoldrick, and Will Beall. Jason Momoa plays Aquaman, a powerful hero who must step up to become the true king of Atlantis. At the same time, he has to stop his evil half-brother, King Orm Patrick Wilson, who wants to bring all seven underwater kingdoms together and start a massive war against the people living on the surface. The movie also features Amber Heard, Willem Dafoe, Dolph Lundgren, Yahya Abdul-Mateen too, and Nicole Kidman in important supporting roles. The idea for an Aquaman movie first started back in 2004, but it didn't really move forward until after Man of Steel came out in 2013. In August 2014, Warner Brothers hired both Will Beall and Kurt Johnstad to write separate versions of the script and decide which one worked best. James Wan officially joined the project as the director in April 2015, and by July 2016, the studio decided to move ahead with Will Ball's screenplay. The main cast was announced throughout 2016 and early 2017. Filming officially kicked off in May 2017 in Australia, mostly at Village Roadshow Studios on the Gold Coast in Queensland. Extra filming and production work also happened in Canada, Italy, and Morocco. Production wrapped up in October 2017. The movie used cutting-edge visual effects with several VFX companies creating realistic underwater worlds, detailed hair movement, lifelike CGI creatures, and huge digital environments that made Atlantis feel real. Aquaman had its world premiere in London on November 26, 2018, before hitting theaters across the United States on December 21, 2018. Critics gave the movie mixed to positive reviews, but audiences around the world loved its action, visuals, and adventure. It became a massive box office success, earning over $1 152 billion worldwide. It became the highest grossing movie in the DCEU, the biggest box office hit ever based on a DC Comics character, the fifth highest grossing movie of 2018, and at the time it was also one of the top 20 highest grossing movies ever made. Because of its huge success, a sequel called Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom was released on December 22, 2023. An animated mini-series called Aquaman, King of Atlantis, which takes place after the events of the first movie but is not part of the main movie storyline, was also released in October 2021. In 1985, in the state of Maine, lighthouse keeper Thomas Curry, Temuera Morrison, rescues Atlanta, Nicole Kidman, the princess of the underwater kingdom of Atlantis. After she is caught in a violent storm, Thomas takes her into his home and cares for her injuries. A few days later, she wakes up and explains that she ran away from Atlantis because she was being forced into an arranged marriage. As time passes, Thomas and Atlanta fall deeply in love and have a son named Arthur Jason Momoa. Arthur is born with a special gift that lets him communicate with sea creatures. Sadly, Atlanta is forced to leave her family and return to Atlantis. Before leaving, she asks her trusted advisor, Novidis Vulko, Willem Dafoe, to secretly train Arthur. Vulko teaches Arthur how to fight and control his amazing abilities. Even though Arthur becomes a powerful warrior, Many Atlanteans reject him because he is only half Atlantean and half human. Feeling like he doesn't belong, Arthur leaves Atlantis behind. In the present day, 1 year after Steppenwolf's attack on Earth, Arthur stops a group of pirates who are trying to hijack a Russian nuclear submarine. He defeats the pirates, brings the submarine safely back to the surface, and rescues all the trapped sailors. During the fight, the pirates' leader, Jesse Kane Michael Beach, is killed. His son, David Yahya Abdul Mateen Tiri, survives and blames Arthur for his father's death. Arthur defeats David in battle and leaves both him and Jesse behind. After the submarine is badly damaged, David begs Arthur to help save his father, but Arthur walks away. Realizing there is no escape, Jesse sacrifices himself by blowing up a grenade so David can survive. David later remembers that his grandfather was one of the US Navy's first frogmen during World War II. Because of his incredible stealth, he earned the nickname Manta, a name that David would never forget. Later, David attacks Atlantis using another submarine, but he is secretly working with King Orm, Patrick Wilson, Arthur's younger half-brother and the ruler of Atlantis. Orm wants to unite all 7 underwater kingdoms and start a war against the surface world because he believes humans have polluted the oceans for too long. It turns out the pirates originally stole the nuclear submarine so they could attack Atlantis and give Orm the perfect excuse to declare war. However, King Nereus explains that at least 4 of the 7 underwater kingdoms must agree before any war can begin. Those kingdoms include Atlantis, Zabel, the fishermen, the brine, the deserters, the Lost Kingdom, and the Trench. If enough kingdoms support Orm, he will officially become the Ocean Master. King Nereus, Dolph Lundgren, the ruler of Zabel, eventually agrees to support Orm after seeing Atlantis come under attack. At first, he isn't fully convinced, but the attack changes his mind. His daughter Mera, Amber Heard, who has the power to control water and communicate with other Atlanteans, refuses to support Orm even though she is supposed to marry him. Instead, she travels to the surface to ask Arthur for help. She earns Arthur's trust by saving Thomas from a giant tidal wave that Orm sends as a warning to humanity. Mera tells Arthur that the only way to stop the coming war is for him to claim the throne of Atlantis because he is Queen Atlana's firstborn son and the rightful heir. Although Arthur doesn't want to become king, he agrees to go with Mera and secretly meets Vulko. Vulko tells Arthur that the only way to prove he deserves the throne is by finding the legendary trident of Atlan, a magical weapon once carried by Atlantis' very first king. Whoever possesses the trident has the rightful claim to rule Atlantis. Before they can continue their mission, armed soldiers attack them. Mera and Vulko escape without being seen, but Arthur is captured. While Arthur is being held prisoner, Orm visits him and reveals what really happened to their mother. He tells Arthur that Atlana was sentenced to death because she had a child with a human, blaming Arthur and the surface world for her fate. Orm offers Arthur one last chance to leave Atlantis forever, but Arthur refuses and challenges him to a duel inside a massive underwater arena surrounded by lava. Orm proves to be the stronger fighter and nearly kills Arthur, but Mera arrives just in time and rescues him. Together they travel to the Sahara Desert, where the Trident of Atlan was originally created. There they discover a hidden holographic message that points them toward Sicily, Italy. In Sicily, they solve another clue and find the exact location of the lost trident. Meanwhile, Orm gives David advanced Atlantean technology and a powerful battle suit so he can hunt down Arthur. Orm also arrests Vulko after learning he betrayed the throne and forces the remaining underwater kingdoms to swear loyalty to him and support his war against the surface. After upgrading the Atlantean armor with his own modifications, David officially takes on the name Black Manta. He attacks Arthur and Mera in Sicily, seriously injuring Arthur during an intense battle. Eventually, Arthur throws Black Manta off a cliff, and everyone believes he is dead. Mera treats Arthur's injuries as they continue their journey toward the hidden location of the trident in the middle of the ocean. She encourages Arthur to finally accept his destiny as both a hero and the future king of Atlantis. When they reach the location, they are suddenly attacked by terrifying sea creatures called the Trench. After fighting their way through the monsters, they discover a mysterious portal that transports them to a hidden sea deep inside the center of the earth. To Arthur's surprise, they find Queen Atlana alive. Everyone believed she had died after being sacrificed to the Trench, but she managed to escape and has been trapped in the hidden sea ever since. Arthur finally comes face to face with Carathan, the giant mythical sea creature that guards the trident of Atlan. Instead of fighting for power, Arthur proves that he truly wants to protect both Atlantis and the surface world. Seeing that Arthur is worthy, Carathan allows him to claim the legendary trident. With the weapon in his hands, Arthur gains the power to command all the creatures of the seven seas. At the same time, Orm leads a massive army to attack the kingdom of the Brine as part of his plan to begin the war against humanity. Just as Orm declares himself Ocean Master, Arthur returns with Mera, Carathan, the Trench, and countless sea creatures. A huge underwater battle begins, and after seeing Arthur holding the legendary trident, many of Orm's followers realize Arthur is the true and rightful king. They immediately switch sides and pledge their loyalty to him with no other choice left. Orm challenges Arthur to one final one-on-one fight because Arthur's death is the only way he can keep the throne. This time, Arthur fights smarter, using moves inspired by the surface world, something Orm has never experienced before. Arthur finally defeats Orm but refuses to kill him. At that moment, Atlana appears alive, proving that Arthur saved her. Seeing his mother again changes everything for Orm, and he accepts his defeat. Atlana happily returns to the surface to reunite with Thomas after many years apart, while Arthur officially becomes the new king of Atlantis with Mera standing proudly by his side. In the mid-credit scene, David is found alive after surviving his fall. He is rescued by Dr. Stephen Shin, a scientist who has spent years trying to prove that Atlantis is real. David agrees to help Shin find the hidden kingdom, but only if Shin helps him get revenge on Arthur in the future. Casting Jason Momoa as Arthur Curry, Aquaman Jason Momoa portrays the half-human, half-Atlantean Arthur Curry, known as Aquaman, the central figure who discovers his heritage and claims the throne of Atlantis while preventing war between the surface and underwater worlds. Momoa was the first major casting announcement for the film and for the character in the DC Extended Universe. Warner Bros. Publicly confirmed him in the role in October 2014 as part of the broader DCEU slate. He had already signed a multi-picture deal by December 2014. Momoa did not originally audition for Aquaman. He tested for Batman in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, performing a scene from The Dark Knight. Zack Snyder liked the unconventional approach and instead offered him Aquaman, a decision influenced by Momoa's portrayal of Khal Drogo in Game of Thrones. Deborah Snyder later noted that the couple were fans of the series and felt Momoa's physical presence and intensity made him ideal for a reimagined Aquaman who felt connected to the water and capable of toughness without the classic blonde, clean-cut comic book look. Momoa has stated he kept the casting secret for years, even from family and friends, and was attached long before James Wan directed or a full script existed. Jeff Johns' work on the comics helped reshape the character in ways that aligned with Momoa's strengths, moving away from the more traditional depiction. Momoa brought a distinctive physicality and rockstar energy to the role. He trained extensively, reshaping his physique with broader shoulders and a trimmer waist for the suit. The gold and green armor, designed with practical and digital elements, became iconic. Momoa has spoken about the challenges of wearing it for long periods, including practical issues with bathroom breaks. His performance emphasizes Arthur's outsider status, sense of humor, and growing sense of responsibility. Multiple younger actors played Arthur at different ages to establish the character's arc. Tainui Kirkwood, Tamor Kirkwood, and Denzel Quirk at age 3, Can Golder at 9, Otis Danji at 13, and Kekoa Kekumano at 16. These young performers appear in flashbacks showing Arthur's childhood in Maine, his early powers, and his training under Vulko. Mona's prior work included Game of Thrones, the Conan the Barbarian remake, and Justice League, where he first appeared as Aquaman. His casting signaled a deliberate shift toward a more rugged, modern interpretation of the character that contrasted with previous live action and animated versions. Amber Heard as Mera Amber Heard plays Mera, the Princess of Sebel, a skilled warrior with hydrokinetic abilities who becomes Arthur's ally and romantic partner. Heard entered negotiations in January 2016. The casting was confirmed 2 months later. She first appeared as Mera in a brief role in Justice League before expanding the character significantly in the 2018 film. Heard has described being drawn to the role because of its strength and agency. She has said she is allergic to damsel in distress archetypes and appreciated the vision of Mera as a self-possessed warrior queen with her own crown and sword. She prepared with intensive stunt training lasting months, often 6 days a week, to handle the physical demands of the underwater combat and wire work. Costume designer Kym Barrett crafted a sleek scale-like suit in cooler greens that allowed movement while emphasizing Mera's otherworldly warrior status. Heard has spoken about the process of being essentially vacuum sealed into the costume and living in it for long periods. Her casting continued the trend of strong female characters in the DCEU. Heard's performance balances combat prowess, determination, and a developing relationship with Arthur. The chemistry between Heard and Momoa was later discussed in industry contexts as something refined in the editing process, but the finished film presents them as equal partners on the quest for the Trident of Atlan. Willem Dafoe as Nuidis Vulko. Willem Dafoe plays Nuidis Vulko, the wise and loyal vizier of Atlantis, who mentors young Arthur and later guides the adult Aquaman. Dafoe was cast in April 2016 in an initially undisclosed role that was later confirmed as Vulko. He appears both in present-day scenes and in digitally de-aged flashbacks, showing him training the young Arthur. Dafoe brought decades of experience in intense, nuanced character work, including roles in Platoon, the Spider-Man films, and numerous independent dramas. His Vulko is measured, strategic, and deeply invested in Arthur's success and the future of Atlantis. The character serves as a bridge between Arthur's surface world upbringing and the complexities of Atlantean politics. Dafoe's casting added gravitas and a sense of continuity with high-caliber dramatic acting to the ensemble. Patrick Wilson as King Orm, Marius Ocean Master. Patrick Wilson portrays Orm, Arthur's half-brother, and the reigning king of Atlantis, who seeks to unite the underwater kingdoms and wage war on the surface world under the title Ocean Master. Wilson's casting was confirmed on December 12, 2016. He had previously collaborated with director James Wan on the Conjuring films, which facilitated a natural working relationship. Wilson's arm is aristocratic, driven by a genuine if extreme belief that the surface world has polluted and threatened the oceans. The performance mixes regal authority, personal resentment toward Arthur, and ideological conviction. Wilson has spoken about the physical preparation, including time spent in water tanks and harnesses. His prior credits include The Phantom of the Opera, Watchmen, and the Conjuring series, giving him range across musical, superhero, and horror genres. The role of Ocean Master allowed him to play a complex antagonist whose motivations are rooted in environmental and cultural grievances rather than pure villainy. Nicole Kidman as Queen Atlanta. Nicole Kidman plays Queen Atlanta, Arthur's mother and the former queen of Atlantis, who fled an arranged marriage and fell in love with the lighthouse keeper Thomas Curry. Kidman entered talks in late January 2017 and confirmed her involvement 2 months later. Director James Wan has stated she was his one and only choice. Concept art and wardrobe designs for Atlanta were created with Kidman's likeness long before she was officially approached. Vaughn and producer Peter Safran described Kidman as possessing a classical, almost mythic quality that suited the character's royal and tragic dimensions. Kidman herself has said she had followed Vaughn's career since his early Australian low-budget horror films and was eager to work with him. She was drawn to the opportunity to play a mother with depth and agency rather than a purely symbolic figure. Her performance spans the early romance with Thomas Curry, her return to Atlantis, and her later fate requiring both emotional warmth and regal presence. Costume designer Kym Barrett designed an iridescent, mother of pearl inspired bodysuit that evoked classical imagery such as the birth of Venus. Kidman's Oscar winning background and international stature elevated the maternal storyline, and the film's emotional core, Dolph Lundgren as King Nereus. Dolph Lundgren plays King Nereus of Sebel, Mera's father, and a powerful ruler whose alliance is crucial to the political landscape of the Seven Kingdoms. Lundgren was cast on April 12, 2017. Known primarily for action roles such as Ivan Drago in Rocky IV and appearances in the Expendables films, Lundgren brought physical presence and authoritative intensity to the part of a king weighing loyalty, strategy, and the fate of his people. His Nereus is pragmatic and formidable, initially aligned with Orm's plans before shifting as events unfold. The casting continued the tradition of placing established action stars in supporting royal roles within the underwater hierarchy. Yahya Abdul-Mateen II as David Kane, Black Manta. Yahya Abdul-Mateen II plays David Kane, who becomes the armored villain Black Manta after a personal tragedy involving Aquaman. He was added to the cast on January 31, 2017. Michael K. Williams had also been considered for the role. Abdul-Mateen II's performance establishes Black Manta as a grounded, vengeful surface world antagonist whose high-tech suit and determination make him a formidable threat. Prior to Aquaman, Abdul-Mateen I had appeared in The Get Down and was building a reputation for intense, layered work. The role of Black Manta gave him a major platform in the superhero genre and set up future appearances. His father, Jesse Kane, is played by Michael Beach, creating a father-son dynamic that fuels David's path toward becoming Black Manta. Temuera Morrison as Thomas Curry. Temuera Morrison plays Thomas Curry, the human lighthouse keeper and Arthur's father. Morrison entered talks by February 2017. Jason Momoa specifically requested him for the role, citing Morrison as one of his acting idols. Morrison's background includes the landmark New Zealand film Once Were Warriors and roles in the Star Wars prequels as Jango Fett and Commander Cody. His Thomas Curry is grounded, loving, and quietly resilient, the human anchor in Arthur's dual heritage. The casting of a Maori actor of Morrison's stature added authenticity and emotional weight to the surface world family sequences. Supporting cast and additional roles. Ludi Lin was cast on May 15, 2017 as Captain Merc, leader of the Men of War, the frontline Atlantean military force. Lin, known for Power Rangers, brought martial arts skill and screen presence to the role of a loyal Atlantean officer. Michael Beach plays Jesse Kane, David Kane's father. Beach had previously voiced a character loosely based on Black Manta in Justice League Unlimited, creating a thematic link. Randall Park joined during reshoots in April 2018 as Dr. Stephen Shin, the marine biologist obsessed with proving Atlantis' existence. Park's casting added a recognizable comedic and dramatic presence from Fresh Off the Boat and other projects. His scenes help bridge the surface world's scientific curiosity with the underwater mythology. Graham McTavish appears as King Atlan, the ancient ruler whose legendary trident becomes the key to the throne. McTavish, known for the Hobbit films and Outlander, provided the gravitas of a mythic founder figure, Leigh Whannell, co-creator of the Saw franchise and a frequent collaborator in genre cinema, plays a cargo pilot in a small but memorable role. Young Arthur performers. The film uses several child actors to depict Arthur's growth. The Kirkwood twins and Denzel Quirk for the toddler years, Khan Goulder for age 9, Otis Danji for age 13, and Kekoa Kekumano for the teenage years. These performances establish Arthur's early isolation, emerging powers, and training with Vulko, creating continuity with Momoa's adult portrayal, voice and motion capture roles. Julie Andrews provides the voice of the Karathon, the massive ancient sea creature that guards the trident of Atlan. Andrews' distinctive authoritative voice lends mythic weight to the creature. John Rhys-Davies voices the Brine King, while Jaimon Honsu voices King Riku of the Fishermen. Andrew Crawford performed motion capture for both the Brine King and King Riku. These voice performances expand the roster of underwater kingdoms and give distinct personalities to the rulers. Arthur must either confront or unite. Additional supporting players include Sophia Forrest as the Fisherman Princess, Natalia Safran as Queen Rina, and various actors in smaller roles such as newscasters, submarine crew, bullies from Arthur's youth, and Italian villagers. Casting directors Anne McCarthy and Kelly Roy oversaw the assembly of the ensemble. Casting timeline and process overview. The casting process unfolded over several years. Momoa was locked in by late 2014. Hurd followed in early 2016. Dafoe in April 2016. Wilson in December 2016. Abdul Martin Teyu and Kidman in January 2017, Morrison in February 2017, Lundgren in April 2017, Lin in May 2017, Beach shortly thereafter, McTavish later in 2017, and Park during 2018 reshoots. Voice roles and smaller parts continued to be filled as production progressed. James Wan's involvement as director shaped many later choices. He had a clear vision for Kidman and leveraged existing relationships, such as with Wilson. Snyder's early influence established the tone for Momoa's casting. The production filmed primarily in Australia, with additional work in Newfoundland, Sicily, and Tunisia, requiring actors eligible to work in those locations or able to travel. Many performers underwent significant physical preparation. Momoa and Hurd trained extensively for combat and underwater sequences. The elaborate costumes demanded both aesthetic impact and functional mobility. The ensemble mixes established stars Kidman, Dafoe, Wilson, Lundgren, Andrews, rising times talents Abdul Mateen II, lean and character actors Morrison, Beach, Park, McTavish to populate both the surface world and the multiple underwater kingdoms. The casting reflects a deliberate effort to balance star power with dramatic credibility, physical capability for action sequences, and the ability to sell the dual worlds of the story, human and coastal, the other ancient political, and spectacularly aquatic. Each major role was chosen to serve specific narrative and tonal needs. Momoa's outsider charisma, Hurt's warrior agency, Dafoe's mentorship, Wilson's ideological antagonism, Kidman's regal tragedy, and the supporting players who flesh out family, military, scientific, and mythic dimensions. The result is a large, multi-generational, multi-kingdom ensemble that supports the film's scale while grounding its emotional and political conflicts. Younger performers establish continuity of character across decades. Voice work expands the creature and royal hierarchy without requiring full live action performance for every entity. Smaller roles fill out the surface world texture, news reports, submarine confrontations, childhood bullying, and everyday coastal life that contrast with the grandeur of Atlantis. Overall, the casting of Aquaman 2018 assembled a diverse group of performers whose collective credits span action, drama, comedy, voice work, and independent cinema. The process began with Snyder's early selection of Momoa and continued under Warm with careful attention to chemistry, physical demands, and the mythic yet personal tone of the story. The final ensemble delivers the dual heritage of the protagonist, the political intrigue of the Seven Kingdoms, and the personal stakes that drive the quest for the Trident of Atlan. Production, development, and pre-production. The road to a big screen version of Aquaman was long and winding, stretching back well over a decade before Jason Momoa ever pulled on the character's iconic golden gauntlets. As early as 2004, a report from Film Jerk.com indicated that producers Alan and Peter Reach, working through Sunrise Entertainment, were trying to get an Aquaman project off the ground at Warner Bros., with a script credited to writer Robert Ben Garant. That version of the project never advanced past the early planning stage and quietly faded away. The character's cinematic prospects resurfaced a few years later, this time folded into a larger ensemble project. In 2007, Warner Bros. Revealed plans for a Justice League film with a script from Michelle and Kieran Mulroney that would have doubled as Aquaman's introduction to moviegoers. Filmmaker George Miller, best known at the time for his work on family films and later for the Mad Max franchise, signed on to direct what became known under the working title Justice League Mortal. Actor Santiago Cabrera had reportedly been attached to play the title role of Aquaman in this iteration. Unfortunately, the ambitious ensemble picture collided with industry turmoil. The 2007-08 Writers Guild of America strike disrupted production timelines across Hollywood, and the film's budget and scheduling difficulties ultimately proved insurmountable. Justice League Mortal was shelved in 2008, and with it went this particular version of Aquaman's screen debut. The character did not disappear from development conversations, however. By the middle of 2009, word emerged that Leonardo DiCaprio's production company, Appian Way Productions, was involved in discussions about developing an Aquaman film. Around the same period, then Warner Bros. Chairman and CEO Barry Meyer publicly acknowledged that the studio had a film built around the character in development, though concrete plans remained elusive for several more years. The real turning point for Aquaman's cinematic future arrived with the 2013 release of Man of Steel, director Zack Snyder's reboot of the Superman mythos, and the film that effectively launched what would become the DC Extended Universe.
In the aftermath of that release, sources at Warner Brothers
Indicated to entertainment trade outlets that the studio was actively mapping out a broader slate of interconnected superhero films, floating the possibility of further Superman sequels alongside a Batman Superman team up, a Wonder Woman feature, and an Aquaman project. DC Entertainment executive Jeff Johns, who would go on to serve as a producer on the eventual Aquaman film, was quoted at the time describing Aquaman as one of the company's priority characters for future development, signaling that this attempt would receive more institutional support than the false starts that preceded it. Concrete movement finally came in August 2014 when Warner Bros. Announced that it had brought on two screenwriters, Will Ball and Kurt Johnstad, to each independently draft a script for the film. Rather than committing to a single vision from the outset, the studio opted to develop the project on parallel tracks with the intention of moving forward with whichever draft proved stronger. This dual track approach reflected the high stakes riding on getting the character's introduction, right? Especially as Warner Brothers and DC were simultaneously trying to build out a shared cinematic universe to rival Marvel Studios' increasingly dominant Marvel Cinematic Universe. Also during this period, acclaimed filmmaker Peter Jackson was approached on two separate occasions about directing the project, but he turned down the offer both times, leaving the search for a director open. This drawn out decade plus gestation period is worth dwelling on because it says a great deal about how the industry perceived Aquaman as a character prior to 2018. For much of the character's screen history, Aquaman had been treated, fairly or not, as something of a punchline in broader pop culture, a hero whose powers of super strength and the ability to communicate with sea life were often mocked as inherently less cinematic than flight, super speed, or heat vision. Executives at Warner Bros. Were keenly aware of this reputational hurdle, and it helps explain why the studio was willing to entertain so many false starts, competing drafts, and directorial near misses rather than simply rushing a version of the character to screen, getting the tone right, serious enough to carry genuine emotional stakes, yet playful enough to embrace the character's inherently colorful, larger than life comic book roots was seen as essential to overcoming decades of public skepticism, and that balancing act would remain a defining tension throughout the entire production, one that critics would later seize upon once the finished film reached theaters. That search concluded in the spring of 2015. The Hollywood Reporter revealed in April of that year that James Wan, the Malaysian Australian filmmaker who had built his reputation on horror hits including Saw, Insidious, and The Conjuring, along with the high octane action of Furious 7, was the leading candidate to take the helm. By June, Van's hiring was made official with the director initially set to work from Johnstad's screenplay. Wan later revealed that he had actually been offered a choice between two DCEU assignments. He could direct The Flash or Aquaman. He chose the latter, reasoning that the character offered fresher creative territory, having in his own words already seen enough versions of the young hero learns to master extraordinary powers, story that a flash film would likely tell. The screenplay itself continued to evolve even after Wan came aboard. In November 2015, David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick was hired to contribute to the script, though at the time it was unclear whether his work would exist as a separate draft or in tandem with the material already being developed. Ultimately, the earlier scripts were set aside and Vaughan and Johns elected to move forward using Bowles' version as the foundation, with Johnson Mike Goldrick later brought back into the fold to perform a rewrite of that draft. This iterative multi-writer process spanning more than a year points to how much care and how much institutional anxiety went into shaping the tone and story for a character who had never before anchored a major theatrical film and who carried a reputation, fair or not, as one of the more difficult superheroes to take seriously on screen. By March 2016, Warner Bros. Had settled on placing the events of Aquaman after the 2017 ensemble film Justice League within the shared timeline of the DCEU, giving the studio a clearer sense of the continuity into which the solo film needed to fit. That same period saw Vaughn confirm that cinematographer Don Burgess, with whom he had previously collaborated on The Conjuring 2, would serve as the film's director of photography, ensuring some continuity of visual sensibility between Vaughn's horror work and this considerably larger scale production. Pre-production activities formally began in Australia toward the end of November 2016, setting the stage for a shoot that would ultimately take the production across multiple continents. Casting decisions for the film's ensemble had, in some cases, actually begun even before Vaughn's involvement was finalized, since several of the principal actors were first attached during the run up to Justice League, in which their characters also appeared. Warner Brothers had announced in October 2014 that Aquaman would be part of its expanding DC Extended Universe slate, confirming Jason Momoa in the title role. Momoa, for his part, indicated later that October that he was in the midst of preparing for his role in Justice League and was uncertain at that point whether a standalone Aquaman film would arrive before or after that ensemble picture. He speculated that if it came first, it would likely be structured as an origin story. By December 2014, reports surfaced that Momoa had signed on for a 4-picture commitment with the studio and DC, and that he had expressed hope that filmmaker Zack Snyder, who was steering much of the DCEU's early direction, would take on directing duties for the solo film, a wish that, as history shows, ultimately went to Wan instead. The supporting cast filled in steadily over the following 2 years. Amber Heard entered negotiations to play Mera, Aquaman's love interest, and the princess of the underwater nation of Jebel, in January 2016, with her casting confirmed roughly 2 months later. Willem Dafoe joined the cast in April 2016 in a role that was initially kept under wraps before later being revealed as Nuidis Vulko, the Atlantean advisor who serves as a mentor figure to young Arthur Curry. December 2016 brought confirmation that Patrick Wilson would portray Orm, Arthur's half-brother and the film's primary antagonist. At the end of January 2017, Yahya Abdul Mateen Tiri was cast as Black Manta, a character long recognized in the comics as one of Aquaman's most persistent adversaries. Actor Michael Casey Williams had also been in consideration for the part before Abdul Mateen too was ultimately selected. That same day, reports indicated Nicole Kidman was in talks to play Queen Atlana, Arthur's mother, with her involvement confirmed roughly 2 months later. Rounding out the ensemble, New Zealand actor Temuera Morrison entered discussions in February 2017 to play Thomas Curry, Arthur's human father and a lighthouse keeper. Dolph Lundgren was cast in April 2017 as King Nereus, the ruler of Sebel and Mera's father. Ludilin joined the production in mid-May 2017 to play Captain Merc, commander of Atlantis' frontline military force. Just under 2 weeks later, Michael Beach, an actor with prior DC Animated Universe experience, having voiced a Black Manta-inspired character called Devil Ray in Justice League Unlimited, was cast as the father of David Kane, the character who becomes Black Manta over the course of the film. Graham McTavish confirmed in October 2017 that he had joined the film in an undisclosed role, later revealed to be King Atlan, the legendary first ruler of Atlantis and ancestor to Atlana, Arthur, and Om. Randall Park was brought on in April 2018 to play Dr. Stephen Shin, a marine biologist character with his own obsession surrounding the lost city of Atlantis, while Jimon Hounsou, Natalia Safran, and Sophia Forrest were cast that July as the King, Queen, and Princess of the Undersea Kingdom of the Fishermen, respectively, as late as November 2018, just weeks before the film's release. It was revealed that Julie Andrews had recorded a secret voice role in the production, lending her voice to Karathen, the ancient sea monster guardian of Atlan's trident. Beyond the credited principal cast, the production drew on a considerable bench of supporting and voice performers to populate its various underwater kingdoms. John Rhys Davies voiced the Brine King, ruler of one of the 7 undersea nations, while Jaimon Hounsou provided the voice of King Riku of the Fishermen. Both characters were performed on screen through motion capture work by performer Andrew Crawford, illustrating how frequently the production separated a character's voice performance from the physical motion captured performance used to build their digital likeness. Natalia Safran and Sophia Forrest similarly lent both voice and motion capture performance to the roles of the Fisherman Queen Rina and Fisherman Princess Gales, respectively. Randall Park's turn as Dr. Stephen Shin, meanwhile, was conceived as connective tissue to future installments in the franchise, since the character's fascination with proving the existence of Atlantis sets up plot threads that would be revisited beyond this film. Lee Wanell, a longtime collaborator of James Wan's dating back to their earliest work together in the horror genre, appears in a small role in the film as a cargo pilot, a low-key cameo reflecting the close creative partnership between Wan and several members of his regular team. Even on a production of this scale, a number of younger performers, including Kobe Booker, twins Tainu and Tamur Kirkwood, Khan Gulder, Otis Danji, and Kekoa Kekumano, were cast at various points to portray Arthur Curry at different stages of childhood and adolescence across the film's flashback sequences, allowing the story to trace Arthur's growth from infancy through his teenage years before Jason Momoa takes over the role as an adult. Taken as a whole, the assembled ensemble reflects a deliberate mixture of established genre stars, respected veteran character actors, and newer talent. Momoa himself had already introduced Arthur Curry to audiences via a brief appearance in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice and a larger supporting role in Justice League, meaning that by the time his solo film arrived, moviegoers had already had 2 prior opportunities to get acquainted with his interpretation of the character before this film's more fully realized origin story filled in the details of his upbringing and his path toward the Atlantean throne. Filming principal photography commenced in Australia on May 2, 2017, operating for a time under the deliberately misleading working title Ahab, presumably chosen to obscure the production's true identity from onlookers and press during its early stages. The bulk of the shoot took place at Village Roadshow Studios on the Gold Coast in Queensland, which had become something of a hub for major international productions thanks to its combination of soundstage infrastructure and proximity to varied natural coastal locations. Beyond the Gold Coast facilities, the production also sent teams to Newfoundland in Canada, to Sicily in Italy, and to Morocco, giving the finished film a genuinely global patchwork of real world locations, standing in for both its fantastical underwater kingdoms and its more grounded surface world settings. Between May and August of 2017, location work unfolded across a range of sites on Australia's Gold Coast, including Main Beach, Coomera Southport, and Amity Point on North Stradbroke Island, along with Hastings Point across the border in New South Wales. These varied coastal environments provided the production with the kind of dramatic, photogenic shoreline imagery needed to sell the film's oceanic themes even before any visual effects work was layered in. Speaking about the unique logistical demands of shooting a film so thoroughly defined by water, director James Wan candidly described the underwater filmmaking process as extraordinarily complicated, noting that it was simply not an easy shoot to execute, a comment that speaks to just how much technical planning went into achieving convincing underwater performances and cinematography throughout the project. One of the most significant physical sets built for the production was the lighthouse belonging to Arthur Curry's father, Thomas, which anchors the film's emotional opening act. Construction and filming on this set began at Hastings Point in August 2017 and wrapped later that same month. The production's reach extended further north into Canada as well, with additional filming taking place in Newfoundland and Labrador, contributing more rugged, wind-swept coastal texture to the film's visual palette. Willem Dafoe completed his work on the film by late September 2017, and the following month, Van publicly confirmed that Patrick Wilson had also finished his portion of the shoot after 115 days of principal photography, a figure that underscores just how extensive and demanding the production schedule had become by that point. By mid-October 2017, the production had relocated to Morocco, filming in the cities of Merzouga and Erfoud, both of which sit near the edge of the Sahara Desert. These desert locations were used to bring to life the ruined kingdom of the deserters, a fallen Atlantean civilization buried beneath the sand where the legendary trident of Atlan was originally forged, a sequence that required blending striking real-world desert vistas with digitally created ruins and structures. Principal photography for the film officially concluded in October 2017, with Wan announcing the wrap in characteristically enthusiastic fashion, thanking the cast and crew for their work on what had clearly been an unusually complex physical and technical undertaking. The sheer geographic spread of the shoot, Australia, Newfoundland, Sicily, and Morocco, on top of extensive soundstage work, reflects just how much of Aquaman's visual identity depended on blending genuinely different real-world textures into a single coherent underwater universe. The Gold Coast location supplied warm, sunlit shoreline footage well suited to the film's surface world scenes and its more tropical underwater sequences, while the rockier, colder coastline of Newfoundland offered a moodier, more dramatic counterpoint, useful for the story's darker or more melancholy beats. Sicily's ancient architecture and sun-bleached stonework provided a ready-made backdrop for a pivotal action sequence built around centuries-old Mediterranean streets, while the vast, undulating dunes around Merzouga and Erfoud in Morocco gave the production a suitably otherworldly canvas for the buried, long abandoned Atlantean ruins hidden beneath the Sahara. Very little of this variety would have been achievable within a single studio backlot, and the decision to send the production to 4 different countries across 2 continents underscores the scale of ambition Warner Brothers and Wan brought to establishing Aquaman's underwater mythology as something visually and texturally distinct from anything else in the DC Extended Universe up to that point. The 115-day shooting schedule, referenced by Wan when marking Patrick Wilson's rap, is itself a useful marker of scale. A production of that length placed Aquaman comfortably among the more extensive shoots undertaken for a DCEU film, reflecting both the number of distinct locations involved and the additional time routinely required to choreograph and execute the elaborate underwater and wire assisted sequences that run throughout the finished picture. Filming a story so heavily reliant on the illusion of characters moving weightlessly through water while keeping performances emotionally grounded and physically safe for the actors involved required an unusually patient, technically meticulous approach to blocking, rigging, and camera placement, all factors that contributed to the schedule stretching across the better part of half a year. Post production overseeing the editorial assembly of the footage was Kirk Morey, a longtime collaborator of James Wan's, who had cut 5 of the director's previous films, giving him a well established creative shorthand with Wan heading into post production. On the visual effects side, the film brought together 2 supervisors with substantial industry pedigree. Charles Gibson, a 2-time Academy Award winner, and Kelvin McIlvaine, who together oversaw the enormous task of coordinating visual effects work being produced simultaneously across numerous vendor studios around the world. On November 3, 2018, roughly 7 weeks before the film's US theatrical release, Wan announced that post production had been completed, bringing to a close a process that had stretched across roughly a year following the end of filming. One relatively minor but notable post production decision concerned regional content standards. The version of the film released in the United Kingdom had some additional blood detail trimmed from certain scenes in order to secure a lower age classification from British censors, illustrating how international rating systems can shape the final cut audiences see in different territories, even when the underlying story and structure remain unchanged. Given the film's setting an entire world of underwater kingdoms populated by fantastical creatures, cities, and technology, the visual effects workload for Aquaman was immense by any standard. The finished film contains roughly 2,300 individual visual effects shots, a workload distributed among a long roster of major effects houses: Industrial Light and Magic (ILM), Base FX, Rodeo FX, Scanline VFX, DNH, Luma Picture, Veta Digital, Moving Picture Company (MPC), Meta Studios, Digital Domain, and Clear Angle Studios, notably. The visual effects for what had at times been discussed as a possible director's cut were produced concurrently with those for the theatrical version. Even though a separate cut of the film never ultimately materialized for release, Industrial Light and Magic served as the lead visual effects vendor on the project, tasked with realizing the underwater city of Atlantis itself, all of its accompanying CGI creatures, the towering sea monster Karathan, and the sprawling climactic battle sequence. Jeff White supervised ILM's contribution for underwater performance capture. Actors were filmed dry for wet, meaning they performed on specially engineered rigs resembling giant tuning forks that simulated the physics of underwater movement without actually submerging the cast.
After which their filmed bodies were digitally replaced with computer generated doubles during post production,
allowing for more controlled, flexible underwater motion than live submersion typically permits. Working from concept art supplied by the film's production design team, ILM's environment artists constructed more than 200 individual buildings for Atlantis, including its instantly recognizable jellyfish shaped architecture, and ultimately populated roughly 600 square miles of city districts with over 7,000 structures for characters and camera to travel through. The underwater vessels seen throughout Atlantis were designed with an organic creature like sensibility, built and animated to move as though they were living things rather than rigid mechanical craft. For the sequence depicting the approach to Atlantis itself, ILM built more than 150 zero individual ships to populate the crowded traffic lanes leading into the city, conveying a real sense of scale and civilization. All of the film's animal and creature work, including Karatan, was created by ILM using traditional keyframe animation techniques rather than motion capture, giving animators precise handcrafted control over each creature's movement. A particularly labor-intensive aspect of the visual effects work involved hair simulation, with roughly 700 shots throughout the film requiring especially high-fidelity hair rendering. Because hair behaves so differently when moving through water compared to air, ILM had to substantially rework its existing simulation software to meet the demands of the production. Ordinarily, hair simulation software relies on a smaller number of guide strands that dictate the motion of broader clusters of hair, a shortcut that keeps computational costs manageable for Aquaman. However, this guide strand approach failed to produce a convincing underwater look. So ILM's artists ultimately simulated individual strands one at a time, a far more computationally demanding process, but one that yielded much more realistic results. Compounding the technical challenge, one wanted the ability to manually direct the movement of characters' hair whenever the physically accurate simulation produced results he found visually unsatisfying, requiring the software to accommodate both automated physics and manual artistic override. In total, ILM delivered 670 finished shots as part of its overall contribution to the film, yet a digital. The New Zealand based effects house, renowned for its work on major franchise films, handled the bulk of the film's digital de aging work, most notably digitally de aging both Nicole Kidman and Tamira Morrison for the film's flashback sequences. Set decades before the present day story, DNH contributed its own de aging work as well, specifically handling the scene depicting a younger Willem Dafoe as Nvidis Vulko training young Arthur Curry in combat. Digital Domain, under VFX supervisor Jay Barton, was responsible for creating the environment surrounding what is referred to as the Dead King's Island sequence. For this section of the film, actors performed in an actual pool of water set against blue screen backdrops, with Digital Domain later adding computer generated environmental extensions, waterfalls, mountainous terrain, and even prehistoric dinosaurs during post production. Most of the waterfalls seen in the finished sequence were generated using the physics simulation software Houdini, though some visual elements were achieved with practical in-camera techniques such as pouring salt and small glass beads to mimic falling water and debris. The team also assembled an extensive internal library of reusable visual effects elements to draw upon across the sequence, and the dinosaurs featured in the scene were, like ILM's creature work, animated using keyframe animation rather than motion capture. Digital Domain ultimately delivered somewhere between 19 and 20 finished shots for this portion of the film. Method Studios, under supervisors David Nelson and Craig Wentworth, took on three of the film's most visually demanding sequences: the fight in Sicily between Arthur, Mera, and Black Manta, Arthur's encounter with the guardian Karathan inside the Well of the Souls, and the moment in which Arthur claims Atlantis' trident. For the Sicily fight sequence, the team physically constructed the main square of the Italian village along with terracotta tiled rooftop set pieces, all backed by blue screens to allow for digital environment extension later on. A fully computer generated version of the village was additionally built using scans and detailed documentation of the real life location, ensuring digital and physical elements would match seamlessly. For the Well of the Soul sequence, Jason Momoa was again filmed dry for wet using specially designed underwater simulation rigs. However, the filmmakers ultimately found these rigs too visually restrictive for the sequence's needs. So, the majority of Momoa's on screen performance in this scene was replaced with a fully digital double, onto which the team then added the CGI environment, the Karathan creature itself, and Arthur's flowing free moving hair. A specially engineered camera setup capable of shooting at 700 frames per second was used to achieve the effect of the camera appearing to travel directly through Arthur's eye during this sequence. Rodeo FX, working under VFX supervisor Sebastien Marot, contributed to two key sequences of its own. The first was the aquarium that a young Arthur visits early in the film, for which the studio relied on detailed simulations and behavioral algorithms to make schools of digital fish move convincingly. For this same sequence, the team engineered both hard and soft coral formations by developing a procedural colonization growth system alongside dedicated tools for generating coral stems and tentacles algorithmically rather than by hand. Rodeo FX's second major contribution was the sunken, ruined Atlantean city buried beneath the Sahara Desert. To build this environment, artists layered sand, dust, and rock formations in a modular building block approach, not unlike assembling a scene from interlocking construction toys before sculpting in the ruined structures themselves. Collapsed buildings, broken bridges, weathered towers, fallen statues, and half buried temples, all carefully textured and lit to convey centuries of decay and abandonment. Sanan Line VFX, under supervisor Brian Hirota, delivered 450 finished shots and handled some of the film's most emotionally and technically significant sequences: the lighthouse and its surrounding coastal environment, the Aquaman title card sequence that immediately follows the Boston Aquarium scene, the moment where Aquaman physically pushes a submarine to the surface to rescue trapped sailors, the massive tidal wave that Orm unleashes, sweeping away both Arthur and his father Tom, along with the aftermath and rescue that follow, the scene depicting Black Manta being paid by Orm following the submarine's delivery, and Arthur and Mera's journey through the kingdom of the trench. For the title card sequence, Scanline built upon groundwork laid by Rodeo FX's aquarium work, ultimately simulating as many as 60 individual digital fish to fill the frame. The large-scale tidal wave sequence combined a substantial simulated wave effect with a mixture of production techniques, day for night photography, blue screen work for actors positioned inside a truck cab, a full-size truck mounted on a rotisserie rig to simulate tumbling motion, an interior cabin set built inside an actual water tank, and additional visual effects simulation for flying debris. To realize the lighthouse itself, The visual effects team constructed a full-size house alongside the base of the lighthouse tower as a practical set with additional house and dock elements built on sound stages. A digital extension was then used to complete the upper portion of the lighthouse tower and to extend the wooden dock fully out into the surrounding sea. For a particularly whimsical transitional shot in which the camera appears to push directly into a snow globe containing a tiny toy lighthouse, the team created a seamless computer generated transition from the physical living room set housing the snow globe to a fully digital wintry coastal landscape. For the eerie, monstrous inhabitants of the trench sequence, motion capture data was recorded on set using live stunt performers, later translated into the finished creature animation. Considered together, the scale of this multi-vendor visual effects operation places Aquaman among the more technically ambitious blockbusters of its era. Coordinating work across 11 distinct effects houses spread around the globe, each responsible for different sequences, different characters, or different technical specialties such as hair simulation, de-aging, or environment building required an enormous amount of centralized oversight to ensure a consistent visual language across the finished film. From the color and texture of the water itself to the way light behaves when filtered down through hundreds of feet of ocean depth. The decision to split work this way rather than concentrating it within one or two dominant vendors reflects both the sheer volume of shots required by a nearly 2.5 hour film set almost entirely within a computer generated undersea world and the practical reality that few single effects studios could realistically staff up quickly enough to deliver a project of this magnitude within the available post-production window. The dry for wet filming technique used extensively throughout the shoot in which actors perform on rigs simulating underwater movement rather than actually submerging in water has become a fairly standard approach for modern effects heavy productions, largely because prolonged underwater filming poses significant challenges around actor safety, breath control, hair and costume behavior, and camera equipment durability. By capturing performances dry and replacing the actors' bodies with digital doubles afterward, visual effects teams gain far greater flexibility to adjust movement, camera angles, and choreography after the fact at the cost of an enormous amount of additional animation and compositing work required to make the substitution invisible to audiences. The film's reliance on this technique across so many major sequences, from the Well of the Souls encounter with Karathan to the underwater sequences populated by the trench creatures, is part of why the finished visual effects workload swelled to roughly 12,300 shots in total. Music composer Rupert Gregson-Williams was announced as the film's composer on March 7, 2018. Gregson-Williams was not a stranger to the DC Extended Universe by that point, having previously composed the score for 2017's Wonder Woman, the fourth entry in the franchise, giving him a working familiarity with the tonal and thematic demands of scoring a large-scale DC superhero film before he took on Aquaman's considerably different, more nautically themed musical challenge. The film's official soundtrack album was released by Water Tower Music on December 14, 2018, just about a week before the film opened in American theaters. Beyond Gregson Williams's orchestral score, the album features two original songs recorded specifically for the film. The first, titled Everything I Need, comes from American singer-songwriter Skylar Grey, who co-wrote the track with Elliot Taylor. The second original song, Ocean to Ocean, was performed by American rapper Pitbull alongside a featured vocalist credited as Rhea. The track was written by Pitbull along with George Bechara, Bianca Axel, and Gabriel Dunn. Notably, Ocean to Ocean prominently samples the 1982 song Africa by the rock band Toto, resulting in that song's original writers Jeff Porcaro and David Pitch. Also receiving songwriting credit on the new track, a fairly common practice when a new composition builds directly on a recognizable previously copyrighted melody or hook. Separately, Joseph Bishara, a frequent collaborator of James Wan's dating back to the director's horror films, composed a standalone cue titled Trench Engage, specifically for use during the film's tense encounter with the monstrous inhabitants of the trench. The decision to pair a fairly traditional, sweeping orchestral score with contemporary pop and hip hop contributions reflects a fairly common strategy for modern blockbuster soundtracks, one intended to serve two different audiences simultaneously: moviegoers looking for a score that reinforces the emotional and mythic scale of the on screen story, and a broader pop culture audience more likely to seek out and stream a radio friendly single independent of the film itself. Placing an original Pitbull single built around an interpolation of a beloved, decades old soft rock classic also gave the marketing campaign an additional promotional hook heading into the film's release, since the pairing of a strongly nostalgic, widely recognized melody with a new pop artist tends to generate its own separate wave of media coverage and listener curiosity distinct from coverage of the film itself. Gregson Williams's underlying orchestral score, meanwhile, needed to accomplish something considerably more difficult: establishing a musical identity for an entirely fictional undersea civilization, its royal lineages, and its various warring kingdoms, all while still feeling of a piece with the broader musical world Hans Zimmer and other composers had already established for the DC extended universe in earlier films. Marketing for the film began well before its theatrical run, unfolding across more than a year and a half through a series of convention appearances, trailers, and promotional events designed to build anticipation among both existing DC fans and a broader mainstream audience. In March 2017, prior to the start of filming, an early look at the project was unveiled during CinemaCon in Las Vegas, Nevada, with Jason Momoa personally introducing a video in which director James Wan walked through early concept art in what was essentially a sizzle reel rather than finished footage. That July, the film's footage made its true public debut at San Diego Comic-Con, where Momoa presented a teaser during the Warner Brothers panel. Wan, introducing the footage himself, described the project in some ways as an origin story for the character. The marketing campaign ramped up considerably the following spring. In April 2018, a new teaser featuring additional footage was shown at CinemaCon, with Wan and Momoa this time joined on stage by co-stars Amber Heard, Patrick Wilson, and Yahya Abdul-Mateen Tu. During this presentation, Wan offered some insight into the film's central conflict, framing the rivalry between Arthur and his half-brother Orm, the eventual Ocean Master, in terms reminiscent of a classic Shakespearean tale of sibling rivalry between two very different brothers. The film's first official trailer had its earliest public preview at the European Exhibitor events in Europe on June 11, 2018. The trailer then received its wider unveiling the following month at San Diego Comic-Con 2018, where it was reportedly considered among the best received trailers of that year's convention. This same trailer subsequently ran attached to theatrical screenings of several other high-profile 2018 releases, including Mission, Impossible, Fallout, The Meg, The Predator, Venom, and First Man, a distribution strategy clearly intended to reach audience already inclined toward big effects driven genre entertainment. During San Diego Comic Con that July, members of the cast also made a joint appearance on the late night talk show Conan, hosted by Conan O'Brien, further extending the film's media presence beyond the convention floor itself. By late August 2018, the studio had begun holding early test screenings of the film, and reactions circulating on social media in the aftermath were somewhat mixed, with many describing the film as solid entertainment without necessarily being an outright triumph. A more substantial promotional beat arrived on October 5, 2018, when Warner Bros. Released a 5-minute extended video showcasing considerably more footage than had appeared in trailers up to that point. The first official television spot for the film followed on October 16, with a second TV spot airing on November 1. That same month, the studio released a set of individual character posters spotlighting Aquaman himself, Mera, Black Manta, Ocean Master, King Nereus, Queen Atlana, and Nuidis Vulko, giving fans a clearer visual sense of each major character's design and costume ahead of release. On November 7, 2018, the studio detailed an extensive worldwide promotional tour scheduled to run through November and December, encompassing fan events, advanced screenings, and premieres in cities including Beijing, London, New York City, Manila, Los Angeles, Miami, the Gold Coast, Sydney, and Honolulu, a genuinely global itinerary reflecting the film's importance to Warner Brothers' international box office strategy. It was also announced around this time that the film would screen during Brazil's CCXP event in Sao Paulo on December 7, 2018. The following week brought an official behind-the-scenes featurette containing footage not previously shown in any trailer, and 2 days after that, the studio released its two primary theatrical posters spotlighting Aquaman and Mera in their respective costumes. The final theatrical trailer arrived on November 19, coinciding with the announcement that advance ticket sales had officially opened. That same day, roughly 30 minutes of footage was screened in China as part of the very first stop on the film's international promotional tour, reportedly generating an enthusiastic response from the audience in attendance. Much of the film's eventual box office success has been attributed to a deliberately broad marketing strategy engineered to draw in a wide cross section of moviegoers, particularly women, an audience segment that had not always been the primary target of prior superhero marketing campaigns. This was achieved through a combination of traditional advertising, an active social media presence, and a network of promotional partnerships designed to extend the film's visibility well beyond typical genre fan circles. Release theatrical Aquaman had its world premiere on November 26, 2018 at the Empire Cinema in London's Leicester Square, a venue frequently used for major studio premieres in the United Kingdom. The film subsequently opened in the United States on December 21, 2018, distributed by Warner Bros. Pictures. In the lead up to release, Atom Tickets announced on November 19 that members of Amazon Prime in the United States would be granted early access to purchase tickets for a special December 15 preview screening held at a selection of theaters operated by AMC, Regal National Amusements, and ArcLight Cinemas, part of a broader industry trend at the time of using subscription service partnerships to juice early ticket sales and generate word of mouth ahead of a wide release. The film's release date itself had shifted more than once during development, At various earlier points, Aquaman had been scheduled for a July 27, 2018 release and later for October 5, 2018, before Warner Bros. Ultimately settled on the late December date, at which it eventually opened a scheduling decision that placed the film squarely in the lucrative holiday movie-going period, competing for family and repeat viewing audiences during the Christmas and New Year stretch. Choosing to anchor a major tentpole release around the Christmas holiday corridor carries both considerable upside and considerable risk. On the positive side, the extended winter break brings families and groups of friends to theaters in large numbers over a period of roughly 2 to 3 weeks, often producing unusually strong week-over-week holds compared to films released during quieter parts of the calendar. Since demand isn't concentrated entirely in a single opening weekend, the way it typically is for films released during other parts of the year. On the risk side, however, a crowded holiday corridor also means competing directly against other major studio releases, vying for the same family audiences and the same limited number of available screens. And a film's opening weekend total can sometimes look comparatively modest against non holiday blockbusters, even when its overall run proves considerably more lucrative in the end. Aquaman's own trajectory, a relatively modest opening weekend by DCEU standards, followed by an unusually long stretch atop the box office charts across the following month, reflects almost exactly this holiday release pattern and helps explain why a film that opened lower than several of its franchise predecessors ultimately finished as the highest grossing entry in the entire series. Home media Aquaman became available for digital download on March 5, 2019, roughly 2.5 months after its theatrical debut. It subsequently arrived in physical home media formats: Blu-ray, 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray, 3D Blu-ray, and standard DVD on March 19, 2019. In terms of domestic home video performance, the film generated an estimated 27.4 million in DVD sales in the United States, along with an estimated 42.2 million in Blu-ray sales, for a combined domestic home video total of roughly $69. 7 million, a substantial haul, though one that reflects the broader industry-wide decline in physical media purchases relative to earlier decades. Even for a film as commercially successful as this one. Separately, director James Wan confirmed that no director's cut of the film would be produced or released, closing the door on speculation about an extended version reaching home audiences. Reception box office Aquaman proved to be an enormous commercial success on a global scale. The film ultimately grossed $335.1 million across the United States and Canada, combined with an additional $806.9 million from other international territories, for a cumulative worldwide total of approximately $1.152 billion now. This result made Aquaman the highest grossing installment in the entire DC Extended Universe up to that point, as well as the highest grossing film ever based on any DC Comics character. It also stood for a time as Warner Bros.' third highest grossing film of all time worldwide, trailing only Barbie, which would go on to earn $1.446 billion, and Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, which earned $1.342 billion. According to calculations published by Deadline Hollywood, the film's net profit, factoring in the full range of production, marketing, and distribution expenses against total revenues, came to approximately $260.5 million, making it the fifth most profitable film release of 2018 by that measure. The film's box office momentum was evident even before its wide release. The day after Amazon's early screening partnership was announced, Aquaman set a new record for the highest 24-hour pre-sale total in the history of the Atom Tickets platform, surpassing the previous record set by Avengers: Infinity War and also outperforming the pre-sale numbers previously achieved by Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle, another film that had similarly been offered to Amazon Prime subscribers early the prior December. The Amazon Prime preview screenings themselves brought in $2.9 million across 1,225 theaters, comfortably ahead of the 1.86 million that Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle had generated through a similar early access arrangement in the United States and Canada. Aquaman opened alongside three other wide releases: Bumblebee, Second Act, and Welcome to Marvin, and had been projected ahead of release to earn somewhere between $65 million and $70 million over its opening weekend, with a projected 5-day total, accounting for the film's Friday release falling shortly before Christmas, of around $120 million. Some more optimistic industry tracking had even suggested figures as high as $150 million were possible. In the event, the film earned $27.7 million on its first day of release, a total that included $9 million from Thursday night preview screenings, or $13.7 million when factoring in the earlier Amazon and Wednesday preview showings. The film went on to post an official opening weekend of $67.9 million or $72.6 million when early showings are included, enough to top the weekend box office chart, though it notably marked the lowest opening weekend of any DCEU film released up to that point. An interesting wrinkle given the film's eventual status as the franchise's biggest global earner. Business continued strong into the following days. The film earned $10.9 million on the Monday after its opening, and then $22 million on Christmas Day itself, making it just the sixth film ever to cross the $20 million mark specifically on that holiday. Altogether, its 5-day opening tally reached $105.4 million. The film's momentum carried well into the new year. Its second weekend brought in $52.1 million, representing a modest 23% decline from its opening weekend, a relatively strong hold that reflected sustained word of mouth and continued holiday moviegoing traffic. The film also performed strongly on individual holiday dates, earning $10.1 million on New Year's Eve and $16.8 million on New Year's Day. Aquaman then held the number one spot at the domestic box office for a third consecutive weekend, adding a further $31 million to its total. Its reign at the top of the chart finally ended in its fourth weekend, when it earned $17.4 million, but was overtaken by The Upside, a film that outperformed expectations to become distributor STX Films' first ever number one box office opening with $20.4 million. Notably, that same weekend also saw Aquaman cross the symbolically important $1 billion mark in worldwide grosses, having already earned $758, $3 million and $940 million worldwide across its second and third weekends respectively. Demographic data collected during the film's run offers some insight into who exactly was showing up to see it. Domestically, the opening weekend audience skewed 60% male, though that skew softened somewhat by the second weekend, settling to 56% male. Perhaps more strikingly, during the film's second holiday season weekend, women over the age of 25 rated the film especially highly, giving it an approval score of 84%. Trade outlet Deadline Hollywood specifically highlighted the strength of the film's appeal to mothers attending with family, noting that mothers actually outnumbered fathers in theater attendance during that stretch, 52% to 48%, and that they responded to the DC hero with particular enthusiasm. rating the film 82% favorably compared to 60% among father figures that lend real weight to the earlier point about the studio's marketing strategy successfully expanding the film's audience well beyond the traditional core superhero movie demographic. International markets proved even more important to the film's overall success than its domestic run, and China in particular stands out as an extraordinary success story. The film opened in China roughly 2 weeks ahead of its US debut and earned 24.6 million or approximately 169.5 million on its very first day there, representing an astonishing 86% share of the entire Chinese box office market that day and setting a new opening day record for Warner Brothers in the country. Its full opening weekend in China reached 93.6.8 million, the best ever opening in the country for any DCEU film for Warner Brothers as a studio, and for any December release in Chinese cinema history up to that point. Remarkably, the film's Chinese haul managed to exceed the entire lifetime domestic China gross of 2017's Wonder Woman within just 3 days of release. By the following Monday, the film had crossed $100 million in China, reaching a cumulative total of $107.7 million. And by its fifth day of release there, it had climbed to $135.3 million, a figure that had already surpassed the entire lifetime Chinese box office totals of every solo Marvel Cinematic Universe film released up to that point, a genuinely remarkable benchmark given how dominant Marvel's films had generally been in the Chinese market. As of an April 2019 tally, Aquaman's cumulative gross in China stood at approximately 298.33 million all, making it one of the single largest international markets for the film.